Hello, my little avocado salads. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I'm very, very excited to be able to answer some of the critiques, some of the criticisms and the questions that I received about my first book on the craft, which is called Rebel Wittch. Rebel Wittch, Carve the Craft That's Yours Alone. It came out in April of 2021, so it's been just over a year now since the book was published by Watkins Publishing in the UK. There has been a French version and a German version as well. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased to be published in the French and German markets too. I had a hell of an adventure writing this book, and I have made a few videos about it. So I will leave down below a few different videos, my announcement video, which it explains sort of how I got the publishing deal and how I felt about the book when I first finished it. There's also a book about the difficulties and the journey of writing a book, you know, sort of advice for you. And I think there's another video there as well about sort of the crunchy parts, the not so smooth parts of writing the book and how I dealt with that. So you can come with me on that journey if it's of interest to you. But for this video, I wanted to specifically keep it to answering some of the regular critiques that I see come up in the reviews of Rebel Wittch. Now, a couple of things, first of all, like disclaimers. First of all, I have not read by any measure all of the reviews of Rebel Wittch. I haven't read them, watched them, listened to them, because I know people have reviewed it for their podcast. I know there's a lot of review videos, which I'm really, really grateful for. I'm so thankful that there was even anywhere near as much interest in the book as there was, and I'm really humbled by that. And of course, lots of people leave their reviews on Amazon or they leave their reviews on Goodreads. I certainly am not a regular cruiser of my reviews. I don't cruise my reviews, darlings. I don't think it's actually that healthy to do that often. So I was super excited about it at first. I couldn't wait to see the first few reviews on Amazon and on Goodreads. I was very giddy about it. I watched a few review videos. For some reason, they're more nerve-wracking. I think because with the written review, you can just sort of skim through. I read a few that were on blogs as well, blog post reviews. You can kind of skim through, and if you're feeling you know, a little sensitive about something, or you don't agree with something that was said, you can click off, or you can kind of skim read. Whereas I think with a video, you're more sort of strapped in and you make that commitment to really hear everything that person is saying in the video. So you have to be in a particular mood, I think, more to watch the video reviews. But certainly I was very excited at first. I definitely thought to myself from the get-go, from the jump, as soon as Rebel Wittch was published, or even before it was published, I thought to myself that I would probably not want to continue to read and watch and absorb reviews for an exorbitant amount of time, because I knew I was going to want to write more books, and I knew that some of those books were going to be witchcraft oriented. And I think if you absorb way too many outside opinions about your work, you are going to find it very difficult to forge forward and write anything else. So I just sort of gave myself the opportunity to enjoy some reviews for a time, and then I came away. So I have not seen by any measure all of the reviews that are out there. I have seen enough though, on and off over time, to understand what some of the main critiques are when it comes to Rebel Wittch. And so I wanted a chance to answer them. And the other thing I wanted to say before I get into the main critiques, which will be timestamped for you, I wanted to say that I do not believe that it is appropriate for an author to come into any kind of review space, whether it's Amazon reviews, whether it's Goodreads, whether it's a blog, whether it's a video, you know, that's been made and discussion happening beneath or whatever. I do not think it's appropriate for an author to traipse in and start correcting critiques, or to start answering to certain criticisms or explaining how they did things. And the reason for that, and I have seen some authors do it, and that's their privilege, that's fine. But as far as I'm aware, in kind of the booktube community, it is considered bad etiquette to do that. And the reason that I don't do it personally is because I do think it's bad etiquette, because I think readers need a place to be able to say what they were thinking when they read the book, what their problems are with it, without feeling like the author is going to come in and pounce on them, and the author is going to have been reading everything, watching everything, putting their beady little eye on the conversation and waiting for a moment to jump in and defend their work. I think what's much more appropriate, if certain critiques or certain questions come up over and over again, is probably for the author to do something much like I am doing now, which is to collect together all of the main questions or the main criticisms that have come up and answer them if they feel inclined to do so. I think it's really awesome if an author feels no obligation to do that. And I certainly don't feel an obligation to do that with Rebel Wittch, but I did find the repetitive criticisms interesting. So the things that I saw, let's say more than 5 people or more than 10 people saying, are definitely of interest to me. So I would like the opportunity to reply officially via the official channel, which is my channel. Like, I do not think it's okay to start to bombard spaces that readers use to put forth valid critiques or issues that they had with a work. I want to do it here on my channel. So strap in, because things are going to get pretty real in this video. I am going to dish the dirt, honey bunnies, on what was going on when I wrote Rebel Wittch, the perspective I was coming from, the things I apologise for and I duly note that are valid criticisms, and also the things that are simply just my fucking personality and I will not be changing them, and that's just how I roll and that's how I write and that's how it is. So yeah, there's going to be definitely a lot of opinions here, so yeah, strap in, get a beverage, whatever you need to do. The first critique, which is completely valid and which I cannot believe that I overlooked in this book, is that there are no Southern Hemisphere dates for the Wheel of the Year. Honestly, I am more surprised than anyone else, okay, that I did not think of this. It just totally evaded me, totally just slipped my mind. And you know what's really irritating about this is that I usually am so careful. If I market anything in my business that is to do with the Northern Hemisphere dates, I always sort of make mention of the Southern Hemisphere date and whether or not witches who follow the Wheel of the Year the other way around can get involved or not get involved, or how they might be able to tweak and change the product or service for them, or whether or not it is purely, you know, a very specific Northern Hemisphere Sabbat that is not going to be transferable over. Whenever I post about a Sabbat taking place on the Northern Hemisphere, I always try to make the effort to say, and here's to my Southern Hemisphere witches who are, you know, doing this other thing. So yeah, I'm really shocked myself that did not end up being made mention of in Rebel Wittch. I think it's a perfectly valid critique, which several Southern Hemisphere witches have levelled at me, both, you know, in terms of reviews and also just to me personally in emails, like, hey, why is there no Southern Hemisphere mention of the Wheel of the Year? And I don't know, but I'm very much looking forward to the next edition so that we can change that shit around. And I already mentioned to my editor that I would very much like for us to make sure that we change that. So very valid critique. And you know, during the writing of a book like this, you know that there's going to be at least one thing that you're going to forget, you're going to need to be reminded, it's going to be something that when you publish the book you're going to want to eat your whole fist. And I think that would definitely be the key one for me, is that there are no Southern Hemisphere switcheroo dates. It just seems really odd not to mention that the wheel only works in the way that I set it out in the book if you are in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, it's a Northern Hemisphere perspective on things when it comes to Wheel of the Year. So why I didn't mention that, why it slipped my mind, I will never know. It's just one of those things, you know. I think that I had a very interesting experience writing Rebel Wittch, and I don't mean that in a good way. It was an incredibly stressful period of my life. Not when I first got the book deal. When I first got the book deal, everything was calm, everything was kosher, everything was together. But by the time I actually got into writing the book, the whole meat and potatoes of the book were cooked under serious amounts of pressure. I was heartbroken. I was dealing with the aftershocks of emotional abuse, frankly. I was in a lockdown in a foreign country. I didn't know when I was going to be able to get back home. Not that it's any huge hardship, my darlings, being trapped in Amsterdam. But you know, there was a lot going on. And there was a lot of stress, added stress, just through the nature of my job. You know, I never stopped working. I never stopped completely giving sessions and readings and stuff, because that's what I do. And that's what my clients expect me to be there to be able to do. to, you know. So speaking to a lot of new clients during the lockdown period, and also trying to make word count on Rebel Wittch whilst dealing with all of my emotional fallout from things that were happening before the pandemic, and also dealing with my own feelings about the pandemic. I mean, I guess that's why, but it will absolutely be changed. There is no question of that. I am not happy that that didn't happen. The second criticism that I want to mention in this video is the criticism that I feel like I've seen most of all. It is a very common critique of Rebel Wittch. I did expect it, but I still want to address it here because this is my moment to just sort of take the time that I need to say my responses to things. Okay, so I definitely expected that there would be some critique around the informal tone of the book, the sort of the humour, the lightheartedness, and also the pet names, okay, the nicknames. I am a big nickname person. That is not something that I just put on for the channel. I have always called people cherry pie and treacle tart and pop tart and chicken. And I remember my boyfriend, when I was in my early 20s, telling me that I should call it on the pet names, because I opened the door for a guy going into our block of flats, and he said thank you, and I said, "You're welcome, chicken." And I remember my boyfriend saying to me, "You know, not everybody is going to be okay with that." And I was like, oh, well, what's wrong with it? It's sweet, you know. In my mind, it just didn't occur to me that anything would necessarily be offensive about that. So it's something that's very hardwired in me. I do not use pet names all the time. I feel like I am fairly appropriate with them, and I do, you know, sort of gauge the situation on a case-by-case basis. But I always made the decision from the very early days of my channel. As soon as I started to get like, oh, hang on, let me turn that down. As soon as I started to get like more than 10 viewers, I knew that I wanted to address them as something, because that's what I do with my friends and my partners and my loved ones, right? So I did expect that there would be some pushback, because I would expect that some people would not have come to my book having already known me from the channel and been watchers of my videos. But when I spoke to my editor before I started writing Rebel Wittch, she did say to me, she strongly advised me, in fact, write the book for your audience, write the book for the people that have been with you, that understand what you do, that have engaged with your videos, you know, really just write it with that tone, write it with your voice. And so obviously, of course, you know, being given that advice, I went with opening the book with, "Hey, cherry pie." Not everybody's cup of tea. It did, you know, occasionally make me feel kind of sad. You know, there was 1 or 2 reviews where the person said I had to stop reading it because I just could not deal with being talked down to, condescended to, infantilized, treated like a baby. And of course, that is not ever what I want to do. I don't see in my head at all any correlation between calling somebody Pop-Tart and thinking of them as a child. To me, those two things are in absolute other worlds, you know. I just do not think of it that way. But of course, it's up to somebody else how they perceive things, and it was perceived by quite a few people as infantilizing, condescending, patronizing, you know, as though I was talking to them like they didn't know what they were doing or whatever. So that is unfortunate. Will I be changing it? No. Will I be putting quite as many nicknames and pet names and cutesy things in the book that I'm working on now? No, but that's not because of the criticisms. It's because it's a different type of book. It's very, very much about the deep rolling bedrock pain aspect of witchcraft and how you use the craft to get you through the absolute worst times, you know, the real sort of baptisms of fire that we experience in life, and how the craft can be implemented there. So it's not as light-hearted of a feel. Certainly alongside the nicknames, pet names critique, there was a lot of critique about like it's very informal, it's very chatty, it doesn't feel like a serious book. It's not a serious book. I mean, look, that's how I am. That will not be changed. I always have a sense of humour about most things, even the most intensely painful of things. I feel like I know when a well-timed punchline has been earned and is needed in a situation, and that's part of my personality, right? So that will always be there. I can understand why it's not a serious enough book for some people, but I think that lack of seriousness that I wanted to bring to Rebel Wittch was also part of giving wider access, broader access to people who do feel that the very serious and very solemn books are making them feel pushed out or like they can't engage, like it's not for them. I wanted Rebel Wittch to be friendly and not intimidating and kind of like accessible, basically. And I think that's one of the things that people did say in the reviews that was positive, was that it is accessible. But I don't think you can make a book really accessible unless it is somewhat cheery, informal, friendly, you know, kind of girl next door-y. So that was definitely a critique as well that I did read. I'm gonna have a little vent now, darlings. Would you allow me? Would you allow me a little vent? Okay, so there was only really one criticism of the book that I read a few times that I really did not like. Look, when you put something out into the world, you accept that not everybody is going to be feeling it, and you accept that there are going to be critiques. You can either read none of them, you can read all of them, or you might do what I would suggest, which is the middle way, where you just, read them sometimes, keep your hand in, but don't get too pent up, don't get too insecure, don't get too fixated on what other people think you should or should not have done, because it's going to affect your next project and it's going to affect your momentum. But it is important to look at what you may have done better or what you could have done differently. So I try and go for the middle way. But there is one critique that really bothered me, and it was that a few people wrote in their reviews, I don't understand why this book needed to be written. Why does it exist? It's just another 101 book. That's a really odd critique. I think it's kind of, unless you're going to break down piece by piece afterwards why you do not think this book has a right to exist, I think that's kind of a bit of a lazy critique, okay? Like, just to say this shouldn't exist is kind of like, I guess the reason it bothers me, darlings, is because I hobnob in the music world a lot, right? As an appreciator. I don't make music, but I appreciate it. And in the metal world, particularly in the world of metal music, there is a lot of elitism, an incredible amount of elitism. And it's probably one of the only things about the metal scene that really bothers me, is that people are very good at mistaking the difference, or conflating, basically, I don't like it with it's not good and shouldn't exist. Those two things are not the same. I don't like it, it did nothing for me personally, I don't get anything out of it, is not the same as it's trash, it's like the lowest form of low art, it shouldn't exist, there's no need for it. These two things should not be conflated, and I feel like they were becoming conflated, and I was not happy with that, darlings, okay? I mean, how do I even answer to that critique? Why does this exist? Yes, it is a 101 book. The treatment of Rebel Wittch was very 101. We wanted to be able to make sure that it could be the first book that you would pick up on the craft, and that would be okay. You wouldn't be left in the dust. But I also wanted to make sure there was enough innovation, particularly in the exercises that I was suggesting, that somebody who would be much more further informed and along the path would be able to pick it up and at least once say, I've never seen that suggestion before, I've never thought of that before, that's something I could try, or at the very least, that's something I haven't done for ages, that's something I want to go back to, I just wanted to create something innovative, something inspirational, something that had kind of different stuff in it to what you would see in the normal stuff, in a normal 101 book. Yes, there is a lot of repetition in 101. I was kind of trying to get away from that, whilst at the same time making sure that in essence it would be okay as a 101. Not to everyone's taste, totally get that. But to say, why does this book exist? I think that's unfair. I still stand by Rebel Wittch as an innovative 101, something interesting, something, in certain ways different than what we could say is the standard fare, the garden variety 101. I also just want to say as well, chickens, before I finish with that particular section of the commentary here, that death is coming for us all. So if you want to make something, fucking make it as well. Like, there's no need for me really to have justified quite so hard how it differed from an ordinary 101. If you have the great passion to write a 101, I guess you should make it, because we are all going to be dust in just a minute. So there is also that argument as well, I guess. One critique that I saw that was interesting was I saw quite a few people saying that The whole book really is about being sovereign. It's about designing your own thing, and that I really hammered that point home a lot in the book. And that is the key premise of the book. It's about taking your personal experiences, your likes and dislikes, your personality traits, etc., and weaving them into the practice that you're creating, your timeline of your life, what has happened on the timeline of your life, how might that go into how you, for example, construct your wheel of the year or your personal sort of annual list of events that are in your craft, all that kind of thing. Yes, I did hammer that point home, but the critique that I saw was like, why does there need to be a whole book on this? Isn't this obvious? And in fact, one person even said, is this not obvious that you should just make things according to your whim? And that seems like, you know, logical to some people, but actually what's really interesting is like, in my neck of the woods and with my audience and with the body of work that I've built up online, actually, sadly, for a lot of people, it is necessary to hammer that point home. I'm afraid it is. There are a lot of people who feel like they should be following what other witches are teaching. They should be doing things, you know, according to some of the most sort of renowned and well-known and well-thumbed through texts in the craft. There are some people who are coming out from under the umbrella of a dogmatic religion where everything was fed to them piece by piece. And when they come into, you know, the wild and psychedelic witchcraft umbrella, they are immediately looking for something again to be fed to them piece by piece. And they're trying to find materials that break them out of that so that they feel that it's okay to be sovereign in their path and that it still matters and it's still legitimate, even if they do not have an institution feeding it to them and explaining to them how it is done properly. There are a lot of people with that situation. There are also a lot of people who began their journey with the craft in some kind of a more institutionalized framework, you know, so something like, for example, Gardnerian Wicca, where there are like, you know, ways of doing things. And I'm not a massive understander of Gardnerian Wicca. I understand enough about the different schools of Wicca, but it's not where it's not my wheelhouse. But I feel like people come out of various different things, various different areas of the craft where things are more structured and where there are understood ways of doing things and there are understood structures within that particular form of belief, right? So when they come out of that, again, they may be looking for resources that allow them to feel like they can be more magically loosey-goosey. And that's where something like Rebel Wittch very much comes in. So it would be a lovely world if we didn't have to hammer home the point that people can make their own sovereign craft. But actually, like I said, with the conversations I've had with some of the clients I've spoken to, with people who frequent my videos, they do express to me that they feel stuck, that they feel like they have to do things a certain way, that they are worried if they very much instinctively feel that they shouldn't do something or they don't want to do something, but they feel like a lot of witches online or a lot of advice in books is hammering home the idea that that is what needs to be done, and then that witch feels like less of a legitimate practitioner because they genuinely deep down do not feel that they want to do that or that they do believe that, and so they question even their right to call themselves witches at all. So that's kind of where my resources come in, I suppose. So I can understand that critique for sure. And I do think, as a rule, I tend to hammer things home anyway. I mean, look, if you've been around for any length of time, you know that's the case. I am a hammerer of points, very much home. I like to hammer them all the way home, even to the point where it's one of the only things my editor brought me up on, was that I hammered the point. And I do that in my conversations sometimes. I try to pull back from it, but it slips out, and so, I think it seems like a worthy critique. However, I just want to say, from my perspective, I am a lot of the time writing for and speaking to people who need that extra encouragement. They very much feel that they are struggling to allow themselves, let's say, to run their own thing. And that's very much a real insecurity and a real question that people have. And I think Rebel Wittch was speaking to people who don't know that they can carve the craft that's theirs alone, so it was for them, and it is a love letter to those people. It is a permission slip for those witches, and it is some feeling that I want to bestow to them. I want to bestow upon them that, like, yes, you are legitimate in your thoughts and feelings about how you want to set things up. Okay, I am now going to have to address the sex magic elephant in the witchcraft room. It's an awkward one, but it is definitely a critique that the book has received. It's something that has been really sort of at times a little bit tough for me to process, because of what it infers about me as a person in a way. It's going to be difficult for me to explain what this critique is about. It is about something that was written in chapter 13 about sex magic, and I would like to read out a little bit from one of the reviews online, just so I can, because this is a sort of a really good way of setting up the critique. This person has kind of written it in a very understandable way. So it says here, my main concern with Rebel Wittch comes from chapter 13 of the book, where the author discusses types of spellcraft. About sex magic, it notes, a partner doesn't need to know what you're doing, but it may be advisable to let them know what's up if they're likely to find a change in your behaviour disconcerting. And then the reviewer says, I find this sentence does not sit well with my moral compass, as I think it is a violation of one's consent, both magically and when it comes to intimacy. To me, this sounds the same as claiming that there is nothing wrong in secretly medicating one's partner, but it may be advisable to tell them if they notice side effects. If this wasn't the author's intention, then it should have been worded much better. This critique is something that is not just once, not just twice, but I've seen it on Facebook groups, and I've seen it, when I've been reading and watching reviews. So let me just explain something about my view on sex magic, okay? To me, in my way of thinking, I am not doing anything to the other person if I am doing sex magic. It has got nothing to do with the other person's energy. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I would operate in sex magic in order to completely protect the other person's energy. I would not want to use that. What I'm using when I do sex magic is much more like I'm using the ecstatic, orgasmic sensation that is coming through from me. I have never ever believed that stuff that goes around online and in books about how you share your energy and your life force and everything else with the other person when you have sex. I've never believed that, and I think that's actually some of the things I've read about that I find to be quite damaging and quite extreme. It's almost like saying you should never have casual sex, or you shouldn't have sex with someone who doesn't know your deepest, darkest secrets, or that the idea that there is some incontrovertible and very serious exchange of energies when you have sex with anyone, I find can actually have some quite shaming undertones to it, and can be quite fear-mongering for those who just would like to have sex for fun. So I don't believe that. So for me, I guess it made sense to say that unless you're going to have changed what you are like in bed while you are utilising your energy to send intention somewhere, you do not need to let the partner know. To me, the idea that you have to let your partner know what you are doing in your brain while you're having sex is tantamount to thought crime. I think all kinds of stuff when I'm in bed, darlings. I have several tabs open in my head when I'm in bed. I'm doing different things. I'm thinking different things. I'm feeling different things. It is an extremely nuanced, complex, emotionally riveting, but extremely it's intricate. It's an intricate act for me. So to me, the idea that I would need to say to someone, oh, by the way, I'm going to be sending some of my energy and intention off towards this thing in my mind, the idea that I have to say that to somebody or else I'm violating their consent, to me is that I just don't believe that. I just straight up don't believe that. And if I had to tell a sexual partner of mine everything I was thinking, feeling and doing with my energy while we were having sex, oh my goddess, that would just be weird to me. I don't think, for me, it is not a violation of consent. If somebody was doing something with their own energy while I was doing a sexual act with them, I would not feel afterwards like they should have told me that that's what they were doing. If they were acting completely weirdly and weren't even considering me or didn't even seem to know I was in the room, and then later told me I was performing sex magic, yeah, that I would be annoyed about. I would be like, well, great. Well, I felt unsafe and I felt like you weren't considering me and you were acting like you were on drugs, God damn it. That would not be okay. But the notion that somebody that I'm sleeping with would be doing different things and having different processes in their head while they're sleeping with me, I mean, I'm sure they would be. I tend to only sleep with people who seem to already have several tabs open in their head, doing different things, thinking different things, feeling different things, going through different processes. Why would it be any different in bed? So to me, I was extremely surprised, actually. Maybe it sounds naive of me, but I was very surprised that this critique came up and that people were very gung-ho for the notion that you should let someone know what you are doing with your energy when you're performing sex magic. And the main reason that this appears to have come up is because it seems that the majority of witches, maybe I'm wrong, but like it seems like a lot of witches believe that sex magic should be something that two people agree on because the energy that you're using is the joint energy signature of both parties. The reason that I don't believe this is because, as I just said, I do not believe I join my energy signature with the other person in bed unless I and the other person consent to that and think that's right for us. I don't think everybody always joins energy signatures and joins energetic forces or connects auras or, because their auras become simultaneous when they are doing sexual stuff. I don't believe that at all. I believe that I can fully reach orgasm with someone I'm not doing that with. And when I reach orgasm, they may be an energetic surplus that I would like to do something with. It in no way affects the other person. And I do not believe that I'm taking their energy from them in any way. In fact, for me, in my practice, that would be badly, badly done sex magic. That would be sex magic where I have not really figured out where the boundary is between my energy and another person's energy. And I feel like I've done a lot of work to get there and to see things that way. So I will be changing the wording of that part in chapter 13 when I do the next edition of the book, but it will only be to make it clearer what I'm saying. I have not changed my opinion. That is my opinion. I now understand much more that that people who have a problem with what I wrote definitely feel that that has got something to do with consent. What it says in this review about like, oh, that's tantamount to giving somebody medication without telling them, I think that's buck wild. That is that's a really extreme comparison. I would never in my wildest fucking dreams give somebody anything without telling them. To me, that is a form of cognitive R word, right? That's cognitive assault. And that is something that I take very seriously. I have friends in my life who were given medications or illicit drugs without their prior knowledge, and it's still to this day, those stories chill me to the bone. I absolutely am against that with every fibre of my body. The idea that that is the same as me performing an act of sex magic with the energy that I have generated from my own journey towards orgasmic ecstasy without using their energy and without it being any problem to them. The idea that that is the same as me drugging them is, in my practice, not the case. If that is the case in your practice, then obviously tell your partner that you will be using that energy for something magical. I do not have to tell my partner that because I don't tell my partner every thought in my head while I'm having sex. I do not tell my partner every process I'm going through while I'm having sex. I have done a lot of emotional healing from really deep wounds while I'm in the sexual act that I did not share with my partner. I did not tell them that I was going to be doing that. I did not tell them that I had done that while we were in the sexual act. You know why? Because they're my thoughts and feelings and processes, and I don't need to share them unless I want to. But was that sexual act potent for me? Did I take that and use that in a very profound way? Absolutely. But it wasn't to do with them. We came together to do that, but they didn't take me through the healing, and they didn't lose anything from me doing healing while we were making love, okay, or whatever the hell we were doing. That's not what happened. I'm not a believer in thought crime. I'm not a believer that I should have to divulge the things I'm thinking, doing, processing, sending out, receiving in. I'm not a believer that I need to share all of that with a partner. Have I shared it before with partners? Absolutely. Absolutely. I've done some cosmic things with one partner in particular I can think of who was completely aware of that, and we discussed that at length together. But I think it's very dangerous to set the precedent that we should always be divulging what is going on with us while we're in bed, and I will never believe that I should have to do that. So definitely different opinions. I don't really appreciate other witches talking about their opinions on sex magic as though they are fact. I would not talk about my opinion as though it's fact, but it is fact for me. So I really wanted to get that out there. The final thing that I wanted to mention before I wrap up this little review of some of the reviews of Rebel Wittch is a critique that came up a lot was that I should have put more word count into certain places. So, you know, certain people wanted me to have a much longer chapter on divination. I think I pretty much agree with that. I would have liked to have much more on divination. I think it's a really important part of the craft for a lot of witches, and I would have liked to have put more word count there, and I might sort of consider that for future editions and discuss that with my editor. Some people said they wished I'd said more on servitors. Me too, darlings. Some people said they wish I'd mentioned more on cultural appropriation and gone deeper into that issue. And in many ways, I agree. Look, the word limit is the word limit, you know. I really could have gone on, and I think, you know, enough of you know me well enough now to know I could have gone on and on and on and Ariston. And if you remember that advert, you were born in the 80s in the UK. So yeah, I could have definitely, and there's so much more I wish I could have said. And I will continue to make videos and write resources and do all of that stuff and teach workshops where that will be a part of it, is just expanding on my ideas and expanding on what is possible. So it's good to know where people wish I could have said more, written more, explained more, because there'll always be a million ways I can do that until it's my time to leave this earthly vessel that we call Kelly Ann Frida Regine Maddox, the first, last and only. Until then, darlings, you can purchase Rebel Wittch in hardback edition, or you can purchase the audiobook of me reading Rebel Wittch. You can do that in a number of different ways. The link is always down below to explain how you can get hold of a copy if you haven't already. I would very much appreciate your support in reading the book if you feel at all inclined to do so. And for those of you who have read it, and for those of you who have left reviews, the good, the bad, the confused and the ugly, I love you for that. I appreciate you for that. I have no ill feeling about anything that people thought I should have said more, said less, said differently. I want all of that. I'm interested in that feedback. If I wasn't interested, I wouldn't have read it. I wouldn't have watched it, you know. Like I said, I do try to keep that middle ground between, you know, absorbing and then coming away, because I would like to write more about the craft, and there are enough reviews of Rebel Wittch to help me to understand that my view on things is potent and helpful for some people. And so I would like to continue to provide for my audience of readers in that way. And I think becoming too fixated on reviews definitely hinders that process. So I definitely will continue on just having that middle way, but it has been a delight today to be able to respond to some of the critiques and explain where I am with things. Another thing I wanted to mention, my darlings, before I bring this video to a close, is that the Pop-Tarts over on my Patreon were in a book club with me, where we went through every chapter of Rebel Wittch and we discussed those chapters in live sessions. If you would like to become a Pop-Tart on Patreon, you can get access to all of the Rebel Wittch book club live feed playbacks, so they're all still available. So if you are going through Rebel Wittch now, or you've been through Rebel Wittch but you would like to understand more about what I was thinking when I came up with things, you know, where I was coming from, what kind of advice I would give for those going through the process of reading, you can go ahead and become a Pop-Tart. I don't mind if you just become a Pop-Tart for a month and then unsubscribe. You know, I'm not going to be offended. Some people do come along, sort of take the resources and leave. Some people like to stay. We have 2 live events every month if you are a Pop-Tart, so it is well worth staying, as well as other bits and pieces as well. You can check out the video over on Patreon that explains what each of the tiers provides for you and why it's worthwhile joining. But yeah, if you become a Pop-Tart, you can access all of the Rebel Wittch Book Club live streams, and lots of people had the chance to put questions to me there, and we do go deeper into things there as well. So thank you so much for watching this video where I respond to my critiques as an author. Very, very interesting position to be in, very exciting, and I look forward to introducing more of my ideas and writings into the world of witchcraft. Please leave your comments down below. I would be very, very interested to know what you think and feel about anything that I've said, even if it's a disagreement. It's all good. Okay, much love. Mwah. Blessed be, my loves.